Hi, and welcome to the X22 Report Spotlight. Today we have a returning guest, Michael Snyder. He is the creator and owner of the Economic Collapse blog.com and endoftheamericandream.com site. You can find his books, his DVDs, everything on his sites. I'm going to be putting all the links at the bottom of the video. And I'd like to welcome Michael back onto the X22 Report Spotlight. Michael, welcome back to the Spotlight.
Thank you. It's great to be back.
Hey, thanks for coming back. And let's start off with the elections. And let's start off with what happened before the elections, because we saw unemployment all of a sudden drop to 4.9%. GDP all of a sudden surged to 2.9%. And the stock market, of course, as we know, is at all-time highs. And now here we are after the elections. And many people think, well, maybe the economy's fixed. Maybe everything is fine. Maybe we don't have to worry. In your opinion and all your research and everything that you looked at, is the economy okay now?
Oh, definitely not. In fact, our long-term problems have gotten even worse. But if you look at it, a lot of people, especially Democrats, may think, well, Barack Obama did a pretty good job. But when you look at it, he's actually going to be the only president in all of U.S. history to never have a single year when U.S. GDP grew by at least 3%. And now remember, he's had 2 terms, so he's had 8 years to try to get this done, but not a single year. Every other president, even back during the Great Depression, they had down years, but then they would have up years too. And every single president throughout U.S. history has had at least 1 year when the economy grew by at least 3%. So we've been in this stagnation period for a while, but it's not been stagnation for everyone. For example, the people at the very top, they've been doing quite well with the stock market rising thanks to the Federal Reserve, pumping it up with funny money, the manipulation. So the people at the very top have been doing well. Meanwhile, people in the middle class and at the lower end of the scale have not been doing so well. For example, you look at, there was a survey taken last year, found that 62% of all Americans had less than $1,000 in savings. And then they took the survey again just here recently this year, and they discovered that number had jumped up from 62% to 69% of all Americans have less than $1,000 in savings. And so what that means is essentially about 2/3 of the country is living paycheck to paycheck without a cushion to fall back on. And so that's a major concern. We've seen credit card delinquencies. They just hit the highest level that we've seen since 2012 in 4 years. So people are getting behind on their credit card payments. We're seeing corporations, they're behind on their debts at the highest level since the last financial crisis. We've got CNN has reported that 35% of all Americans have a debt that is at least 180 days past due. So approximately 1/3 of all Americans can't pay all their debts. We've got the rate of home ownership, which is kind of a sign of how the middle class is doing. Well, that's fallen for 8 years in a row and is now hovering near a 50-year low in terms of the percentage of the country that owns a home. We've got poverty exploding. In fact, New York City, right where Wall Street is from, where Donald Trump is from, is one of the areas which has been doing better than the rest of the country. Well, the number of people the number of homeless people in New York City just hit a brand new record high. And so we've got all these, even in this time of when things have been fairly steady, the economy's not really been growing, but things have been relatively stable. Somewhat, and we can talk about why that is, and I've got some very strong opinions on that. But even during this time of relative stability, Dave, we've got poverty exploding, we've got struggles for the middle class, things are getting harder for ordinary Americans, and we haven't even gotten into the midst of the next great crisis yet.
You mentioned, why you think this is stable. What's your view on this? Why do you think the economy is stable throughout this 8 years?
Yeah. Well, when people say, well, how has Barack Obama stabilized things? Why aren't we in the middle of a rip-roaring depression right now? Well, the number one factor, and no one ever really talks about this, but the number one factor is debt. And let me give you an example from real life. If you went out today and you went, to a big box store and pulled out your credit card, and you could buy a big 70-inch television, bring it home, and then if you could go out and you could go to a car dealership and get the most expensive car you're approved for and go on vacations and, apply for a bunch more credit cards and spend money. For a while, you could live like a millionaire. But eventually a day of reckoning comes. But for the moment, what you're doing by going into debt, you're bringing future consumption into the present and raising your standard of living. And as a nation, that's what we've been doing. For example, total household debt in the United States at this point is up to $12.3 trillion. The total amount of corporate debt since the last financial crisis has approximately doubled, the greatest corporate debt binge in history. But the biggest of all, of course, is the U.S. national debt. When Barack Obama entered the White House, our national debt was sitting at $10.6 trillion. Today, it's sitting at $19.84 trillion, just shy of $20 trillion. So more than $9 trillion, what the federal government has done is taken $9 trillion from our children, our grandchildren, future generations of Americans, stolen all that money, which breaks down to more than $100 million an hour, every single hour of every single day since Barack Obama entered the White House, taken all that money from future consumption, brought it into the present to make the economy look better now. Because when the government spends money, well, that goes to pay government contractors, it goes to, pay researchers, it goes to as transfer payments into the pockets of Americans who go out and spend it in the stores. So government spending without a doubt stimulates the economy. But so much of the spending is taking consumption from the future through debt, bringing it into the present, making the present look better, because without all that debt that we've gotten into, without a doubt, we would be in a horrible economic depression right now. But Barack Obama has essentially cheated the future, because future generations of Americans are going to have to pay back more money than we borrowed because of interest. So he's cheating the future and destroying the future, because that's what debt does. It destroys the future to make the present look better. So without all this debt, I wouldn't even want to imagine what our economy would look like. But of course, when you go into all that debt, a day of reckoning comes eventually.
From all your data and your research and looking at all these different economic indicators, do you think that we're in a recession right now?
Well, John Williams of shadowstats.com is convinced. He tracks the numbers, and he tracks what they would look like if honest numbers were actually being used. And according to his numbers, GDP has been shrinking by not by a ton, but by between 1 and 3 and 5, depending on the time. But GDP has been slowly shrinking since about 2005, according to his numbers. Now, so who knows how honest the numbers that the government is actually giving us actually are, because they're always monkeying with them and changing them and altering them. So how honest are they? I don't know, but we do know that things are getting harder for those on the lowest end of the scale, those in poverty. We know that things have been getting tougher for the middle class, but in terms at the high end of the scale, the elite and those, the wealthy, and those who have been in the stock market, they've been doing quite well. So, it's been a very uneven time here in America. And, even Barack Obama and the Democrats, they talk about, income inequality is growing. The gap between the very wealthy and everyone else is increasing. Everyone acknowledges that. And so, that's kind of the situation we're in right now. Now, at some point, things are going to reverse even for the people at the top, because, when the financial markets hit hard times, which I believe they are. In fact, with the election of Donald Trump, I think that's become far more likely, and we can talk about why.
We know that right now that there's going to be a transition. Donald Trump is going to be inaugurated in January. He's going to be coming into the White House. He's going to inherit this economy, what has been going on around the world. And when he gets everything and, he looks at it and he hears what's going on, maybe they'll tell him the truth. Maybe they'll sit down with him and say, the economy is not as good as we've said. Do you think that he will be able to turn this economy around?
I'm scared. I'm hopeful that for Donald Trump to be successful, but I am skeptical. And the reason why is this, because under the current situation where, our current system, we're using a debt-based currency. The heart of the system is the Federal Reserve, and the system is designed to devalue our currency. And since the Federal Reserve was created, the value of our currency has declined by about 98%. It's designed to get us in an endless debt spiral from which there's never any possibly hope of escape. And since the Federal Reserve was created, our national debt has gotten more than 5,000 times larger. And so Donald Trump's going to be faced with a dilemma. If he wants to continue forward with the current system, well, if he wants to try to start living within our means and only spending the money that we take in through taxes, we would instantly go into a depression, and then people would blame him and say, oh, you're so horrible, Donald Trump. So in order to keep even our current standard of living, much less improve things, he would have to keep going into debt basically at the rate that we're going into debt right now, which would be horrible and would be, a criminal, regarding future generations of Americans. What we're doing to them is absolutely horrible. So in order to turn things around, turning things around, if he wants to monkey with tax rates, if he wants to reduce regulations, all those things are good, but they're just going to have a very small impact on things. I mean, if he really wanted to change things, he needs to fundamentally change the system, because the system is fundamentally flawed. And so to fundamentally change the system would involve shutting down the Federal Reserve, going to a debt-free form of money, and fundamentally changing things at the foundation. And he hasn't talked about that. I'm skeptical that he would be interested in doing that. And so I doubt that would happen. But that would be, in order to fundamentally fix things, you've got to fundamentally change the system. So, he's going to inherit this situation, and maybe he actually believes that he can fix things, but I'm extremely skeptical at this point. And then the big problem is, the reason we've been able to go into so much debt, Dave, is because the rest of the world has been willing to loan us trillions upon trillions of dollars at ultra low interest rates which are way below the real rate of inflation, it's irrational, and irrational bubbles like this don't last forever. But now, since the election of Donald Trump, what have we already seen start to happen? The stock market has risen, but the bond market has had problems. And the rest of the world, they don't like Donald Trump so much. China doesn't like him. Europe doesn't like him. Saudi Arabia, they wanted Hillary. So the rest of the world doesn't like Donald Trump so much. So they're saying, well, maybe we're not going to lend the United States all this money at ridiculously low interest rates anymore. So what we've seen is the rates on 30-year Treasury shoot up dramatically, there for a time right after Donald Trump got elected. And what happens is, because you've got mortgage rates which are affected by that rate. You've got auto loans which are ultimately affected. You've got credit card rates, you've got, student loans. And so when the 30-year mortgage just hit 4% here within the past few days. And so that means when people are shopping for a home, they can afford less of a home. So, that affects the housing market, or people can afford less of a car when they're going out to shop. It affects, ultimately, these interest rates affect everything throughout the economy. So if Donald Trump gets in, relations with the rest of the world don't go well. The rest of the world is kind of sours on lending us money. Rates go up. Well, that is going to slow down everything. So that's another key factor in why we're not in a rip-roaring depression right now, because interest rates have been so low. We've been able to borrow this money at super, super low interest rates. That changes, and that changes everything. And so that's another huge area of concern for me, and another reason why I think we could be looking at a huge economic slowdown while Donald Trump is in the White House.
I mean, we're already seeing the effect of interest rates moving up just a tiny bit with the mortgage apps. I mean, they're down quite a bit as the interest rates are moving up a little bit. And we can see the effect already of all of this. And the only reason I'm seeing that, and what you're saying too, Mike, is that they're keeping the rates very, very low because of all this debt. They will not be able to support it if they raise interest rates. That's why, like Europe and Japan, they're in negative territory already. And, the Fed here continually is talking about raising the interest rates. Do you think they're going to actually raise the interest rates this December?
They actually might decide to do that, which would be not a good move. But, so that's that's alarming to me because, and throughout the last several decades, we've seen whenever interest rates go up, economy slows down. Whenever interest rates are pushed down, the economy tends to do better. They pushed them to the floor, while Obama was president, and then they were very hesitant to raise them, and this whole period right before the election, because they certainly didn't want to hurt Hillary Clinton's chances. But now they're talking about raising them. They might raise them, and there's a whole bunch of factors. There's many people out there that are concerned that the global elite didn't want Donald Trump, obviously, and they're very upset at this point. So there's some out there that are thinking, hey, once Donald Trump gets in, that they may purposely crash the system so that they can blame it on Donald Trump and not only get their revenge, but then turn the political wins and things in their favor and for their agenda. So we'll see what happens. I don't know, but yeah, raising rates is not a good idea at all. But to a certain extent, the Fed's hands may be forced to a certain degree by the market as rates raised in the marketplace. And so I don't know. We'll see.
It's very interesting. Many people say that he's a complete outsider. Other people saying, no, he's not an outsider. He's still with the establishment. And you said before, if he doesn't remove the central bank, if he goes along with the banks and he doesn't really do that much, maybe he is an insider pretending to be an outsider. We don't know yet because he hasn't really done anything. A lot of talk out there. But what's very interesting about all of this is you talked about the crashing of the economy, that they might do it while he's in office. And what's very interesting about Donald Trump is that he's like the king of bankruptcy. He knows how to handle bankruptcy. He knows how to, restructure. And this country, has a lot of debt. He deals with a lot of debt. And the entire country, if it collapses, it's actually kind of good, or maybe they placed him in the White House to handle the actual collapse. I mean, what do you think about that?
It's always possible. I mean, we don't know what's going on behind the scenes. And, Donald Trump, he definitely appealed to outsiders during the campaign, and he spoke against, free trade and a lot of these other things that are dear to the global elite. So, was he just pretending? I don't know. I guess time will tell. Time will show us what he really intends to do, what's really in his heart. But I don't think he is an insider, in my opinion. I don't think he is a puppet of the global elite. But I could turn out to be wrong. We don't know. But in any event, I am expecting a very chaotic time when Donald Trump is president, not just with economics, but in terms of potentially civil unrest, where we've got, it looks like Donald Trump is going to end up losing the popular vote for a very wide margin. I checked yesterday, the total Hillary's lead was now close to 1 million votes. And the far left is very, very upset about that. We've already seen, riots and protests in cities all over America. And then they're planning the biggest one of all for January 20th, Inauguration Day in Washington, D.C., which is traditionally a time of celebration, the nation coming together, celebrating the new president. But they want to disrupt it as much as possible. They've, this Not My President movement. They've got a hashtag DisruptJ20, which is trending on Twitter and Facebook. And they want to go in, they want to disrupt, they want to force festivities inside, they want to basically do as much as they can to make the point that we don't like Donald Trump, we hate Donald Trump, we're going to fight him every step of the way. And, and of course, Donald Trump has shown that he's kind of got a short fuse. And so this feud, this anger, this frustration, which I believe right now, America is more divided than I've ever seen in my entire lifetime. And it could get a whole lot worse. And my fear is that we could see civil unrest, riots, protests, anger, frustration boil over. At the same time, we're having economic problems, and this whole thing could just spiral out of control very, very rapidly. So I'm hopeful for good things under Donald Trump, but I also see for the potential for this to go horribly, horribly wrong.
Do you think these protests and the rioting and stuff, do you think this is all being orchestrated to divide America right now?
Well, I believe George Soros and far left organizations are definitely organizing things, pushing things. So there is an orchestration, but I also believe that so much of what people are feeling is real. I mean, people out there actually hate Donald Trump. A lot of people do believe that he's essentially the devil, and the things that and they call, they say, oh, it's going to be like living in Nazi Germany, and they use these terms which evoke emotions in people and get people feeling a certain way. And so I believe the anger and frustration are real. Now, those that are attempting to orchestrate things are using that and fueling that without a doubt. But I also believe that it's tapping into real emotions and how people are really feeling out there. So I think there's both things going on.
So what do you think, like Soros and others, what do you think the end game is? I mean, what are they trying to accomplish with all of this?
Well, I think that Hillary Clinton was supposed to win. The pundits were telling us 80-90%. And so I think the left was lulled into a little bit of a sense of complacency. They didn't think there was any chance Donald Trump was going to actually win. So they didn't like him, but they thought, oh, he's going to be easily defeated. So they were kind of stunned and shocked and surprised that he actually won. And so now they're shifting gears, and they want to oppose him and fight him as much as possible. I'm sure they'll try to find some ways to try to impeach him, but with the Republicans in control of the House and Senate, that is going to be kind of far-fetched. So I'm sure they'll be trying to bring up whatever scandals they can. They'll be trying to block him however they can in Congress. They'll be, trying to do whatever they can. But then also, they're going to, try street action, street protest, try to, but basically they want to fight whatever he's trying to do as much as they can, obstruct, slow down, and keep Donald Trump from accomplishing anything that he's set out to do. So, and really, I think the election of Donald Trump is going to be the number one most galvanizing moment for the far left that we've seen in modern American history. So it's gonna give them motivation. It's just as if the election of Hillary Clinton would have kind of galvanized the right, but even more, because there's no president that the left has ever hated more than Donald Trump, and he's not even in office yet. And so I think this is going to fuel them, fuel their numbers, fuel their passion, fuel their causes. And so, I think we're going to see some big things from the far left.
Do you think their ultimate goal is to maybe push a civil war here in America?
Well, some people are already potentially talking about that, because they're saying, well, the system has failed us. And even, we've had some celebrities go online here over the past few days and talk about revolution. Let me see if I can find some of these quotes for you, because on Twitter, they're actually using the word revolution. And let me, here we go. Let me see if I can find this for you. And it's not just, the rank and file, but it's actually celebrities that are calling for a revolution. One of them was, here we go. Let me see if I can find it. I don't think I can. Oh, here it is. On Twitter, Katy Perry, she warned, quote, "The revolution is coming." And this is Katy Perry, one of the biggest pop stars in the world. And then comedian Sarah Silverman said, quote, she called for, quote, "revolution in the streets." So there, we've got these prominent celebrities that are calling for revolution in the streets. And of course, people all over Twitter, they're threatening Donald Trump. They're saying that they're going to do this, they're going to do that. So we'll see. I think a big indication of how powerful this movement is going to be is January 20th, because they've got a couple months. The other day we saw a protest in New York City, 25,000 people showed up basically on the spur of the moment. But I think January 20th, the far left has, 2 months to organize their forces to say, hey, we're going to descend on Washington, D.C. We're going to protest Donald Trump like no one's ever protested inauguration before. And how big that gets, I think, is going to be an indication of how powerful this movement's going to be moving forward.
What's funny about all this, Michael, is that, in the beginning, everyone agreed to the rules. Okay? We're going to campaign. I'm not talking about how they campaign, but we're going to campaign. We're going to let the people vote. We understand there's electoral college, and we all agree on this. And, we had the election, and everyone thought, like you said, the corporate media, the U.S. government, they actually thought, oh, it's in the bag. Hillary won, no problem. And they find out that, oh, wait a minute, this is not true. Everything they told us was a complete lie, that Hillary's not winning. Everyone voted the opposite way. And now they don't like the rules. Now they're very upset with the rules. So when we look at all this, they were okay with it when they thought their candidate was going to win. And now that their candidate lost, they're not okay with it, and they're trying to change the Electoral College. There's petitions out there. I think Senator Boxer is out there creating a bill. How far do you think they will get to try to change this?
Well, I don't think they're going to get very far with their attempt to change the Electoral College, and it would be extremely hard to do because you're dealing with the Constitution. It's not like trying to pass a new law, but and the far left is very upset about all this right now because Hillary Clinton, like I mentioned earlier, she's ahead in the popular vote. And by the time all the votes are counted, it's likely to be well over 1 million vote difference. But let's, putting the shoe on the other foot, if conservatives were in the same situation and Donald Trump had actually won the popular vote by a very wide margin, but then had lost the Electoral College, well, conservatives would be extremely upset too, and understandably so. In my opinion, and it doesn't have any, even before the election, I was saying, hey, it would make perfect sense to, have every vote count equally and to get rid of the Electoral College and have the American people directly elect the next president. To me, that just makes rational sense. Now, since, Donald Trump won the election by winning the Electoral College but losing the popular vote, a lot of Trump supporters, don't necessarily want to hear that, and I'm certainly glad Hillary Clinton is not going to be our next president. So, for my own personal reasons, if nothing else, and that if she had gotten in, things would not necessarily have gone very well for people like me. So I'm glad she's not going to be our next president. But just from a logical, rational point of view, I think it only makes sense to have every vote count the same, the American people to directly elect the president. But now all these conservatives are out there defending the Electoral College because that's how Donald Trump won. But ultimately, I don't think it makes a whole lot of sense. But I'm certainly pleased with the outcome that Hillary Clinton didn't win, although I'm not nearly as optimistic as a lot of people out there about what a Trump presidency is actually going to mean for the future. I was actually far more concerned about keeping Hillary Clinton from getting into the White House than I was in terms of electing Donald Trump. But so we'll see what happens. But as far as the Electoral College, I think it should be changed, but I don't think it ever will be.
Mike, that's the only place where I disagree with you. And I wasn't for Trump. I wasn't for Hillary. I was for a person that was going to work with the people, be for the people, not for the central bank, not for corporate interests, not for foreign interests. But I see why we do have the Electoral College, no matter who won. It doesn't make a difference to me because I still feel there's the shadow government, there's the central bank. But going with just the popular vote, the reason the founding fathers put this into place is, one is some type of safety check because you can manipulate the votes. And they didn't want a candidate going to the popular cities with the population in that city and only going to those individuals and completely disregard the rest of the country. And with manipulation in the voting systems, which actually Bev Harris from Hacking Democracy shows that you can do this, where you can manipulate the votes. If we went with the popular vote, it's very easy to manipulate the votes in your favor. Actually, there's a report right now that about 3 million illegals actually voted in this. If you subtract those individuals who are not citizens of the United States, who jumped over the border, who came here illegally, and I have no problem with people coming into the country if they go through the process, but just jumping over the border and saying, okay, I'm in the country. It's like jumping over the turnstile in a football game saying, okay, I'm in the game, I didn't pay, or getting into a movie theater or anything else where you can say, I made it, too bad about you guys, you had to pay, you had to go through the process, no big deal. But I think that is why they put that into place. And there are states and there are certain regions that, want a say. And if you only, go to New York, if you only go to Dallas, because all right, that's where the majority is. I know if I just get this, that will be 51%. The rest will be 50%. So all I have to do is do this, manipulate whatever I need to do in those certain cities. The rest I don't care about. And it's very easy to do. And I think this is what the Democrats and the corporate media and Obama thought. They thought, okay, we have this down. We know we're going to get the popular vote. And hopefully with this popular vote, we will get the Electoral College. Because if you noticed, a lot of the laws with the Electoral College, if you don't vote in a certain way, you're fined. So they're kind of forcing them to go along with the popular vote, to go along with what is going on. And they kind of knew this. And if you can manipulate it enough, they were hoping that this would all fall into place and go where they want. And actually, if you look back when Gore was running, they thought, oh, wait, we have this here also. We have the popular vote. Once again, it's strange how it happened twice. And they had the popular vote, and Bush, had the electoral. He switched, I forgot which state it was. It wasn't Florida. I know Florida was part of it, but there was another state which he flipped that usually voted in a Democrat way, and it flipped it to a Republican. But we can see that this happened now twice. And this concerns me. And I see why the founding fathers put the Electoral College there, because they were trying to protect and make the voice of the people even across the states. So it's very difficult to manipulate the elections.
Yeah, and we've got voter fraud. We've got, in a perfect world, we would have, voter ID in every state, where you'd have to show identification and prove you're a citizen in order to vote in all 50 states. And so we've got so many problems and so much corruption. So there's a great deal of things that need to be fixed with our system, without a doubt.
I agree
but,
with you.
Before the election, they were saying, hey, it's possible Trump could win the popular vote, but the Electoral College seemed to favor the Democrats. And in terms of what Trump had to do, how he had to win so many close states in order to have a chance. Now, he ended up running all those states and winning a few extra up in the Rust Belt. And so it really was a miracle. But really, those that are supporting Trump kind of forget that really the way the Electoral College falls these days, it really appears to give the Democrats an advantage, a built-in advantage. So this could have easily gone the other way. So, and I could very easily see a future election where a Republican won the popular vote, but the Democrats won the Electoral College, and that would not be necessarily a good outcome. So there's pros and cons.
Yes. I wanted to move on to the corporate media and how they're going after alternative news sites. I mean, Google, Facebook, Twitter, the corporate media, they're going after fake news. And they're now putting out lists of, these are the sites that are fake. These are the ones that are real. Don't listen to this. And I mean, because what they're saying right now is that, Trump won because of all this fake news. So I guess my site, your site, Zero Hedge, Activist Post, these would all be considered fake news. What do you think about this? And why do you think they're doing this?
Yeah, the list that's circulating was put out by some really liberal assistant professor out there who, and she doesn't necessarily represent the mainstream media, certainly, and hopefully nobody's listening to her. But in terms of Google and Facebook saying they want to go after fake news sites, well, if they just go after the fake news sites, and there are these websites out there that purposely publish fake news stories, and they end up getting shared all over Facebook because they kind of sound real, and they're purposely designed to be the kind of stories which people go, oh man, that's so shocking, let me share that. But it is fake, and it's purposely fake, and they're doing it to get clicks and to get traffic and get attention, or for other more insidious reasons. So these fake news sites do exist, and they are a problem. And so if Google and Facebook just go after those fake sites and that's it, that could potentially be a good thing. But now if they say we're going against sites that aren't truthful or not accurate, which they would translate into, okay, the alternative news sites, conservative news sites, patriotic websites, well, then that's a major problem. And so, could part of the backlash be of a Trump victory that they're going to go after people like us? It's entirely possible, and it's a major concern, and it's something that I'm watching and hoping that does not happen. But we'll see, because, and this is another thing with the division. Instead of the country coming together now, there's so much anger, and after the election, the fighting is continuing. I mean, throughout this election, we've seen this election rip apart families, friends, churches, communities. Relationships that took decades to build are being divided, are being ripped apart. And so there's so much anger, so much frustration. And now that the election is over, there's a backlash. Conservatives are just, pounding on liberals. Liberals are pounding on conservatives. So they're, we're divided, and it continues to get worse. And a house divided against itself will fall. And so, a lot of conservatives are feeling really good right now because Trump got in. But I don't necessarily see so much reason for optimism.
I agree with you that if we stay divided, this is not going to work. And the founding fathers, they've been telling us this all along, that the nation cannot be divided. We need to come together. We need to find out who our true enemy is, what the problem really is, and look past, Republican, Democrat, and say, something, who's behind the curtain? Who is orchestrating all of this? Why do we have these individuals? And I think we all need to come together and stop the protests, the riots, and everything, and try to figure out how we can make this country better, how we can remove those individuals like the central bank, of course, the shadow government, those who are big money elite individuals that are pulling the strings on certain things going on, like George Soros and others. I think we need to come together to find out, like, these are the individuals that we need to stop, that we need to say, something, you cannot control the government anymore. We need them to be removed. But at this point, I don't see this happening right now at all.
Yeah, there's some hope that Donald Trump would come in and drain the swamp and fundamentally change the government, root out a lot of the corruption and a lot of the influence. And that so far, the signs I'm seeing, and for example, there are reports he's considering a former Goldman Sachs banker to be the Treasury Secretary, and that's certainly not draining the swamp. So and concerned with potentially some of his other cabinet appointments that have been floated so far. So not a lot of promising signs so far on that front. And then, of course, you mentioned the central bank, the Federal Reserve. It's not something Donald Trump really even talks about, but that's, at the heart of things. And that's one of the reasons I wrote the article I did yesterday about, what Donald Trump needs to do. My article is entitled "Why Donald Trump Must Shut Down the Federal Reserve and Start Issuing Debt-Free Money." And he could do that. President Kennedy did it, started issuing debt-free money. He didn't get rid of the Federal Reserve, but he started issuing debt-free money back in 1963. And Donald Trump could do that. Donald Trump could make these big changes. He's certainly I believe he's an outsider, and he's bold enough and strong enough potentially to make big moves, but he's not talking about it right now. It's not on his agenda. So We'll see. A lot of people are hopeful that Donald Trump could make some fundamental changes. We'll see. But I'm perhaps less optimistic than some people.
Where do you think we stand with war? I mean, we were leading up to World War, with Russian aggression, everything that's going on in the Middle East, the South China Sea. Where do you see us right now with respect to war?
Yeah, if Hillary Clinton would have been elected, well, Vladimir Zhirinovsky, he's a top Russian politician. He had an interview with Reuters where he openly said, hey, if Hillary Clinton is elected, you're essentially voting for World War III. And over in Russia, they've been preparing like crazy. They just had a civil defense drill involving 40 million people. A news broadcast recently, they openly told people, hey, you need to find where your local bomb shelter is in case war breaks out with the United States. So we've been on this trajectory toward war with Russia because of Syria, because of Ukraine, because of everything else. And so that was a major concern. Now there's hope that now Donald Trump has gotten in, and certainly the Russians wanted Trump to get in. There's hope of improved relations with Russia. And so far there's some promising signs. However, Donald Trump is talking about people like, hey, people like John Bolton for Secretary of State. What? That would be a major, major problem, because talk about a warmonger. And of course, John McCain's already telling him, hey, you can't get soft on Russia. The Pentagon is very, very anti-Russia at this point, and will Trump listen to the generals? So, a lot of people are hopeful. I'm kind of skeptical, because so much of the establishment, the military right now is very anti-Russian. And Donald Trump has not said he's necessarily pro-Russian. He said, hey, I'd like good relationships with Russia, but we'll see. So we'll see on that front. Now, alternatively, I think China is already extremely alarmed, because who was the politician that was toughest on China? It was Donald Trump, and deservedly so, because China's been manipulating their currency. They've been cheating us on free trade. They've been stealing our technology. The list goes on and on and on and on. And so Donald Trump has been talking really tough on China. And so China's saying, hey, Donald Trump, if you try to do any of these things you talked about, we're going to go into a trade war. You're not going to be able to sell your iPhones here. We're going to slap all kinds of tariffs on everything, which they already have, but they said they're going to do it even worse. And so China's gearing up for a trade war. And of course, we still got the situation in the South China Sea. How is that going to be resolved? But I could see relations with China getting a lot worse under Trump, because the Chinese, they've been having the good end of the game for a long time, and now Donald Trump wants to make things more equitable, and the Chinese are not thrilled about that at all, and they're already very upset with us because of the South China Sea. So, and then the concern is, once again, Donald Trump does have a temper. Now, of course, Hillary Clinton actually has a worse temper, and people didn't talk about that much during the election, but she has a horrible temper. But Donald Trump has a temper too. And so if, things with Russia, they could be going good for a little bit, but one single thing, and Donald Trump could suddenly decide, oh, Russia is on my bad side, or China's on my bad side. And we've seen how Donald Trump goes after his enemies. And that doesn't work necessarily in the area of international diplomacy. So I could see things getting worse with China real quickly. And if something happens and Trump decides he doesn't like Russia, things could get a lot worse with Russia too. So I know people are optimistic that maybe the march toward World War III, has been diverted. But I wouldn't come to that conclusion so quickly. Let's wait and see what happens.
Michael, thank you very much for being on the X22 Report Spotlight. Once again, how can people see your work?
Yeah, the website I'm primarily known for is theeconomiccollapseblog.com, or if you just go to Google and type in The Economic Collapse, it's the first result that comes up. And then I also have other articles and things that I do. But if people want to find all my writing in a single place, they can go to themostimportantnews.com, or just go to Google and type in The Most Important News. It's the first result that comes up. And then people can find all my books. I've got 3 books. They can find them all on Amazon.com.
Michael, once again, thank you for being on the X22 Report Spotlight.
Thank you so much. I very much enjoyed it.
Me too. Thank you.